Psalm 34:8 says, "Taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man who takes refuge in him." You know, as I look at my life and the lives of others, I see how seldom we taste and see that the Lord is good. We tend to put boundaries around God. He can only work in this kind of environment or this kind of setting, and that tends to be a religious approach. But I believe that God has designed a relationship, a relational approach, where there's give and take, and most of all, where there's risk. We take a risk with God. We will actually taste and see that He is good. As you listen to Chuck's story today, I wonder if you would begin to taste and see that the Lord is good, that you would take a risk with Him. Maybe it's to start a business. Maybe it's to start a new endeavor. It might be to found a new nonprofit. It might be a new effort in a ministry. It might be taking a role at your church. But I would encourage you to take those steps today, to take a risk with God. Taste and see that He is good. You will take refuge in Him and you will be blessed. God has designed you to come on this scene of events now and to leave the world a better place as you pass through it by bringing His restoration to others, being a tool used by Him. I want to encourage you today to pursue that with God, to listen to His still small voice and respond to His Holy Spirit prompting on what He would have you do with your life. Taste and see that the Lord is good. I want to talk more about your business model. How you go from 200 to 800 employees, maybe pushing 1,000. Do you need a certain number of sound engineers? Is that what do you call each person that talks to the...
We call them sales engineers.
Sales engineers. Do you need a certain number for each number of customers? And has that rung true pretty well throughout the whole time? And how does that work?
It does. Every one of our sales engineers, except for maybe 3 or 4, and we have about 240 sales engineers today out of that 700 or 800 staff. But just about all of them have a recording technology degree from one of the great schools across the country, have a lot of background. I'm one of the few that actually is not degreed there. But they come to work at Sweetwater, and before we let them talk to a customer, they go through our Sweetwater University, and that's 12 weeks and before they ever talk to a customer.
Wow.
And so we're teaching them how to develop relationships. That's the number one thing. We teach them the Sweetwater sales philosophies. We have a firm belief that you don't negotiate price until the selling's done. I want to make sure it's the right product for the customer. I want the customer to make sure that they're buying it from the right place, know why to buy it from Sweetwater, and then we get around to price, because I think price is irrelevant until the other pieces are in place.
It is. You probably know that from buying cars.
I do.
You want the particular car, and then you figure out the price.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then the third part of the training is, of course, getting up to date on the latest products and technology. So even though you may have gone to school or been on the road, it's changing all the time. And so you have 12 weeks before you ever talk to a customer. But then soon you're on the phone and you're developing relationships with customers. And you might have a small database or a small group of customers that have been given to you, but our biggest challenge right now is we have more customers coming to us than we can handle well. We can't hire enough sales engineers and get them trained fast enough.
Really?
Yeah, it's a big challenge for us. So much so that we started a program at IPFW and at St. Francis, University of St. Francis, to grow future employees. We started those 4 and 6 years ago, respectively.
That's incredible.
But each one of those sales engineers has anywhere between 2,000 to 5,000 customers, and then they call those customers every day, every week, every month, at least twice a year, depending on the customer's interests and buying patterns and that sort of thing. Again, the customers love talking about their gear, so they're happy to take those calls. In fact, about 80% of our phone calls are outgoing calls. We drive the business. We do not wait for the phone to ring.
I need a high five or something.
Okay.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
When I owned Kruse International and I found out if I got a phone number, I could get your address, I'm trying to think when that happened. That was probably somewhere in the 90s. I just created a whole marketing system with somebody who had his car for sale, and I knew the experience he would have. I'd send him these letters, I'd send him these brochures, and I knew what that story would be over time, and then I'd have the most wonderful person in the world call that guy, and he wants to talk about his car.
Of course he does.
And if it's still for sale at that time, buddy, we got him ready to go in the auction. And I knew they'd have a good experience. So I love that, being proactive about the sale.
Well, it's worked really well. I mean, I'm very blessed to have 36 years 36 years this coming January, where the top line and the bottom line of our company have been bigger than the year before. And that's through the recessions and all that. And that's a God thing. That's, it's unbelievable.
It really is.
Yeah.
It really is. And I was going to ask you that. Tom Monahan told me one time, the founder of Domino's Pizza,
Sure.
he said, I didn't make as much money as I did on one store, Mitchell, until I had 117 stores. He said, in between, it was less money than I made on one store. But your growth has been exponential and progressive. It's been better than the year before. Yes. That's a remarkable success story. I bet you get approached probably innumerable amount of times a week to go public.
Go public, sell the company, let investors in, probably 2 to 3 times a week on average.
And how do you handle that? You just politely tell them no?
I do politely tell them no. Mm-hmm. I actually take every phone call. It's one of my beliefs, and I teach my employees. So I will talk to that stockbroker or the venture capital firm or whoever it is and explain no. Although I do have an interesting story. Mm-hmm. In 1997, I sold 80% of the company. I don't talk about that a lot, but I sold 80% to a great capital firm in Chicago.
Why'd you do that?
Well, all my professionals, my accountant, my attorney said, your company's up to $20 million and you've got everything you have invested in it. And if something happens, you'll lose everything you have. And how much bigger could it really get?
I've heard those conversations before. I know exactly what you're saying.
So that makes sense to me. So I went and interviewed a lot of capital firms and we had always been profitable. So it was easy to find a firm that wanted to invest in the company. And I found the right firm and they paid me a lot of money and they owned 80% and I owned 20%. Through the 4.5 years that they owned it, they left me alone. I ran it completely the way I wanted. I reported to them 4 times a year, and it was a pretty great partnership. I was fortunate to choose good people. Mm-hmm. At the end of that 4.5 year experience, and .com became .bomb. Most of the .com businesses did not work, and we never really argued over much of anything. The only one point is they wanted me to separate the mail order part and the internet part from the rest of the company, and I kept saying that made no sense. And they kept saying, oh yeah, but you're gonna pay a lot of money for eyeballs. That was the talk back in that period, and you can pay $20, $30 just to get a person's name and on that internet list. And I said, that doesn't make business sense to me. Well, 6 months later, the internet kind of imploded, and most, other than eBay and a few other things, that didn't really work so well. And the partners came back and said, oh, you're so smart. We're glad you didn't listen to us. But at that point, they wanted out of the business, which is the way that business works. And so they made me go present my company to a lot of my competitors. And we got an offer from the biggest competitor. At that time, they were a publicly traded company, and they really wanted to buy Sweetwater. They kept talking about Sweetwater being the hood ornament of their business and how we provided such better customer service, and that I could teach customer service to all 200 of their stores. And they wanted me to eventually run all of the stores because I'm younger than them. And then in the next breath, they said, but you pay your salespeople too much money, and you provide customer service more than we believe you should do. You shouldn't do technical support. You should send people back to the manufacturer. And you're going to have to shut your warehouse down because we already have a big warehouse in Kansas City. And I said, well, I don't like any of this. And so I went back. An accounting mindset to drive it. Mm-hmm. So I went back to my partners and said, I want to buy the business back myself. And they kind of scoffed. They said, well, you can't do that because we know how much money you have from what we gave you 4.5 years previous. And they sort of underestimated my relationships in Fort Wayne.
Now, what you're saying is they didn't think you had enough money to buy it from them.
Because I needed to meet the offer of my competitor.
And you had grown in that period.
And I had grown during that period, and they wanted a big return for that. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, I'll meet that competitor's offer. And again, they were the rich Wall Street banker types, and they scoffed. And I had a great attorney friend, great buddy, and he and I came up with this plan that we would go to one of the local banks in Fort Wayne and borrow. This is the most brilliant thing he ever taught me. We would borrow money on the inventory that they technically owned. They owned 80% of the inventory. So I borrowed as much money as I could on their inventory from a great bank here in town. And that wasn't enough. I needed more money, but what they'd underestimated is the relationships that I had had with people in Fort Wayne. So I went to about 20 different people in Fort Wayne and said, would you help loan me the rest of the money? Most of them didn't know I'd even sold the company previous. Sure. But I said, I want to buy the company back. And 18 of those 20 people said yes. And so I offered to pay them a lot of interest, but they were unsecured. They'd be after the bank. And I got enough money to buy it back from my partners, brought it back to Fort Wayne in 2001, and have never looked back.
You've been written up in so many magazines as being one of the best companies to work in the nation. People fly in here because you need the sales engineers. They fly in here from all over the country. They see what kind of work environment you're going to provide them, and they are eager to work for you. And that's unique. I think that is really unique. I think that's what makes it so much the earmarks of a ministry.
Well, it's humbling for sure. I mean, I thank my lucky stars. I pray every day, thank you, thank you, thank you. That's all you can do.
2.5 million customers, and each one will get a call from you once or twice a year from your company?
Yes,
probably?
Absolutely.
That in and of itself is quite a task.
Yeah, we have all kinds of systems and tools in place to make sure that happens because we want to keep the relationship going. And we haven't really talked about that, but we really, really have a great relationship with most of our customers. We know not only who the person is buying equipment, but we know their dreams and aspirations. We know what equipment they have. We're tracking quite often spouses' names, dogs' names, children's names, their other interests and hobbies, what churches they go to. You know, the kind of stuff you would do with a friend.
And so that can come to screen when they're talking to them?
It can, but it's done very naturally too. I mean, it's not like an interrogation process.
How is Fluffy doing?
Right, exactly. In fact, that's one of the most amazing things to me. Myself and all of my sales engineers, we have relationships all over the country, all over the world. And anywhere I travel, if my friends knew I was there and not calling them for dinner or lunch or breakfast, they'd be hurt, you know. And so sometimes I have to fly incognito so they don't know I'm there because I got to get in and out. But it's a real honor just to have that sort of relationships all over.
My business was built on relationships and nothing else. I mean, you give excellent service in what you're doing, but there's just, to me, it's the foundation of business. I think that's why work and worship in the Old Testament is often translated from the same word. It's all bad in Hebrew. And God is designed so that work would be worship. And you're one of the greatest pictures of that I think this country has ever seen. Where do you think you go from here?
Whew, that's the frightening question. We have been growing 20 to 30% every year for the last couple of decades. And the last couple months, we've been growing 39%, 35%. If you grow 20% over 4 years, with a little bit of compounding, you've doubled in size. You know, we're going to be nearly $400 million this year.
In sales.
In sales for just Sweetwater, and that doesn't count the other companies that I have.
I want to get to those.
And it's frightening to think that by the year 2020, we could be $1 billion company. It's arrogant to think that way, and I surely don't mean it in an arrogant sort of way. I'm just taking the numbers and seeing how they extrapolate based on history. It'll be $1 billion company. Well, how in the world do you plan for that? And how many thousands of employees is that? And 2020 is not very far away.
Right.
And so that's my biggest challenge, is to figure out how can we control the growth, and is that realistic? And if I don't plan for it, that's not smart. If I plan for it, it does seem a little bold, a little, and that every day, honest to goodness, every day I'm in business, every day that we're successful, you know, people ask me questions, how did it happen? What's it mean? There's no way on earth that it could be a human that can control that.
Right.
I've made too many mistakes. I have too many employees that have made mistakes. That is a God plan that I truly believe in. The picture becomes more and more clear, because there is just no way I could have planned for this.
Well, he gave Joseph 7 and maybe 14-year plan, you could say. And you can look all throughout Scripture where there's a window of God providing a vision that's going to be followed by his provision, and it sounds like that's what he's doing again with you, and it's just wise to steward that. I've encountered several of your employees, nowhere near all 1,000 or so, but everyone I've encountered has just been so gracious and obviously competent, but so kind. Is that part of your training, or is that just from hiring the right people up
It's
front?
both. It's both. We absolutely try and hire the right people, and we're extensive how we test them, and we look at their backgrounds and that sort of thing. Then once they're there, I call it they're working on the Super Bowl team, and unlike the Colts, our Super Bowl team gets to win every year. but they're great players that really do inspire you, and the growth that we have every year and the accolades that we get from our customers and from the industry, it really is like being on a winning Super Bowl team every year.
It is.
The second hour that all those employees are there, I meet with each and every one of them. And I talk through some of the basic principles of what it's going to take to be successful at Sweetwater, and the kind of things that are important to me. You know, we're dealing with humans on the other end, treat them the way we want to be treated, the way I'd want to be treated. We return every call. We, treat everyone with grace. I teach them the Boy Scout oath: the trusworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. Again, great principles at business too, and even down to the last one, and reverent. Mm-hmm. And it just creates a great employee. And what's amazing and humbling to me is every day of every week, I get probably 50 to 100 emails from customers raving about their experience. I get a stack of about 1.5 inches of postcards thanking us for doing business with them, the customer. And I don't know about you. I say thank you all the time, but I have never taken the time to write a letter to a company to say, thanks for doing a good job and selling me a couch or whatever.
Doing what you ought to do.
You're right, doing what you ought to do. And I get hundreds, literally hundreds, every day of every week of customers raving about their experience at doing business at Sweetwater. It's just, it's speechless for me.
It's the relationship coming back full cycle.
Mm.
You've been so successful that other businesses, other nonprofits have asked you to be on their board. And I'm just amazed with how you take the phone calls. From experience, I know how you answer emails so quickly. But you've taken stewardship of your resources, I think, very seriously. Can you talk about some of the boards you're on and what your efforts with those organizations are like?
That's also a big subject and probably a full-time job in itself. But my wife and I know how blessed we are. And there are lots and lots of great organizations that frankly can use the help, can use the support. And they're serving some people that really, really need our help. And so there's quite a few. In fact, Sweetwater and Lisa and I have supported about 400 organizations every year for the last many years.
How many?
400.
Now,
and I don't mean that in any way. Please don't take it that way.
I know that. I know that. But how do you even support 400?
Well, I have a full-time person that helps kind of figure out which ones we can support and not support, and it's part of our purpose now. And so it's millions of dollars every year that we give back. I've been on the board at Easter Seals Ark for many, many years. You know, thank goodness I don't have a close family member with those kind of special needs. But boy, if you did, what an amazing facility. We've supported Turnstone for a long time, another great organization. And the list kind of goes on and on. I mean, most of the better important organizations in this community we try and support.
I love your affiliation with the Auburn Court-Duesenberg Museum.
Yeah, it's a new relationship for me. I'm looking forward to being involved there.
You're going to be great.
I'm the board chair next year, so
I'm excited for you.
Wish me help.
Oh, well, you got it. Lutheran Hospitals, you're on the board of that.
I'm on the board of Lutheran Hospital and the Lutheran Network. I told you way back when that I kind of wanted to be a doctor, so I guess I'm living vicariously through the other doctors. But it's been a lot of fun serving on their boards and helping the doctors understand customer service. They're great humans, great doctors, but sometimes they don't always get the customer service side of things.
Sure.
And I can also be the eyes and ears from the street. And it's what all these hospitals, we're very fortunate in our community to have two great networks, and Lutheran's one, and of course Parkview's the other one.
Yeah, sure. Well, you've also purchased or started other businesses. I want you to talk about those and how you applied what you've learned to those.
The first one that I branched out into several years ago was a car business. And a lot of people assume since I have a personal car collection, those would become intertwined. And honestly, I've never sold a car at my car business, nor have I had the car business find me a car. But I knew there was an opportunity in this region, since I get a chance to travel, to bring some higher line cars to Fort Wayne that aren't traditionally sold in our community. And so I wanted to sell that 1, 2, 3-year-old car, whether it's a high-end Audi or a Mercedes or a sports car like a Lamborghini or Ferrari, but sell them in the Fort Wayne market where those marquees weren't necessarily here. My goal, frankly, was to create some jobs from Fort Wayne. Understand, you know, it's about 3 years old now, so the recession was just starting to end.
Yeah.
And we had a great building near downtown that was an eyesore. And I thought if I cleaned it up, I could encourage others in that area to clean up the property and I could create jobs. And today we have, 11 or 12 people that work there, and it did exactly what I thought it would do. It's worked out really well.
And we never picked up what you did with your former Sweetwater building. We need to talk about that.
Great question. Former Sweetwater building. I've been involved with a relatively new church in Fort Wayne. Great pastor, great friend, great pastor, great teacher. And he had worked at one of the other big churches in town and had the vision one day to start a church. And he started the church very humbly in the basement. Maybe that's why I liked it. He started it humbly in the basement of his house. And after a couple of meetings at the house, he moved to a movie theater. And that's where I got involved. And my wife and I really loved the way he taught and spoke. And so we got involved about almost 8 years ago now. And we were in that movie theater for a few years. And there were many things about the movie theater for a church. And of course, that's been done all over the country. But there were many things about that were just awesome. The barriers were down. So people that normally didn't go to church were willing to come in to a movie theater and go to church. On the other hand, it probably was a little difficult for community because as soon as the service was over, they wanted you out of the movie theater so they could start showing movies on Sunday morning. And so after a few years of being at the movie theater, we needed a new location for the church. And I told the pastor he could use our building because it was up for sale until it sold. And we moved the church in there, and the church took off kind of the same way Sweetwater has taken off.
Yeah, great.
And after a few years of free rent, we worked out a favorable deal, so the church was able to acquire the building, and now it's just a great church. We've got about 1,000 members that are coming every week, and just it's a really, really relevant, fun church. People that, frankly, had not been to church or had drifted away from church, and my wife and I are just really engaged and really supportive as much as we can be of the church.
That's tremendous.
Called the Point Church.
And that tells you how God's at work in your life, in all parts of your life. And there it is flowing through the church, his design to restore our culture, our communities. That's just awesome. Talk about your other businesses.
Wow. The next business was a very interesting one. We had a business in town that taught people how to fly airplanes. And it's a very sad story, but the person that owned the business had a catastrophic accident and killed his wife and himself, and his son lived. And what's even more catastrophic is he had an accident about 7 or 8 years earlier, and the father and son had lived through that first accident. But anyway, once that accident happened, the estate came to me and said, would you be interested in buying his flight business? And I said, absolutely not. There's no money in aviation. And they said, well, would you at least come talk to us and hear about it? And I said, all right, I'll do that. So I went out and I met the young fellow that ran the company, and he was a great young Christian man, and his wife, and they'd relocated here from further out west. And I figured out through the recession, they never made any money, but they didn't lose any money. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. And there were about 7 or 8 employees involved and 4 or 5 airplanes. And the more I got into it and I saw, they'd all lose their jobs, I didn't want to see that happen. And so I was able to acquire the business, frankly, pretty inexpensively. I paid for the value of the airplanes. And got involved and immediately put some marketing and some little more direction and started buying some new planes. And within months, we were doing double the business the business they'd done in the past. This month, it's now been 2 years, 3 years, I don't remember which it's been, but we're consistently doing double the business that they did before. We've added a helicopter to the business, so now we can teach people how to fly helicopters. We've added several new airplanes and just a maintenance department so we can fix other airplanes. It's just going really, really well, and I was able to keep those jobs and grow a few more.
We haven't talked a lot about family. I think a lot of people watching, entrepreneurs, CEOs, executives, they struggle with how to I don't like the word balance, but how to prioritize family with your business. It's not good for the family if you neglect your business. That's going to create a whole bunch of problems for your family. So they go together. I wonder if you just take a few minutes and describe how you blend family with business.
You're absolutely right. It's a huge, huge challenge, and I consider myself of having 2 failures in life. One of them is I didn't get my Eagle Scout as a Boy Scout. Got really close. Had all the merit, everything I needed. I needed to do one more citizenship project, and then I met girls, and somehow I quit Boy Scouts. And the other one, and I hate to call it a failure, but I was married before for 21 years, and I'm sure a lot of that was my fault with growing the business and that sort of thing. And she was a great woman, and it takes 2, but bottom line, after 21 years, there were no children involved, thankfully, and that was one of the differences. I always wanted children. She didn't. We separated. That wasn't necessarily a proud day in my life, but what became a proud day, I was able to get remarried. Met a just wonderful, wonderful woman, and she already had 2 little boys that were 3 and 5. I treat them like my sons, but technically, legally, they're my stepsons. Today, they're 20 and 22, but I've been with them through all their growing up. I've been to all their music events, all their sporting events. I really did always treat them as my own. And by having them a little bit later, and then 7 years later, I was blessed with my first natural child, my daughter.
Adderley.
Adderley, thank you. I feel since I had all 3 of them a little bit later, I probably was a better dad than I would have been in my 20s or 30s. All my friends today are having grandchildren, so I'm a little jealous, but I love that I can absolutely take the time. I can balance life. I run really hard, as you can imagine, at work, and I also run and play really hard at home too. But I do what I need to do to be there so I don't miss anything, and it's important to me. They grow up so darn fast.
They do.
Yeah.
You own a couple time machines. You got a couple jets that help you balance that. I mean, they're good for business and they're also good for family. I remember when I leased a jet the last 5 or 6 years of my business, and I gained 30 to 40 days a year at home. And it's literally priceless. But you're you you're sort of self-taught helicopter pilot as well?
I mentioned there were only a couple things I've taken lessons in. I took lessons in golf, and the FAA requires you to take lessons in helicopters. I'm not very good in golf, so the lessons didn't work. And I have an interesting story that I had an incident, I'll call it, with a helicopter. About 3.5 years ago, I crashed a helicopter, which that in itself was a very interesting story. But we landed on one skid and it rolled on its side, and we all climbed out and walked away, and nobody got hurt, no scratches or anything, and very blessed. But through that evening, I had 1,000 emails from friends all around the world because the story went viral. It was on front page of lots of papers, and they showed pictures of it catching on fire, except it's diesel fuel or Jet A fuel, and it takes a couple hours for that to really get hot enough to burn. But the press only took the pictures of 2 hours later, and they wrote stories that it exploded on impact. There were stories that the pilot was dead. That was me. There were stories that the passengers were carried out unconscious. Totally not true. That evening, I was called by Good Morning America and the Today Show. They wanted to interview the hero pilot that saved 6 other passengers. I didn't go to New York. I didn't feel like a hero at that point because it was partly my fault. They got into some weather, and I chose to set it down. And just as I was setting it down, it went on its side. And, you know, there's a lot of ways you can look at that, but, you know, I clearly had help getting it on the ground. I wish it would have landed on its skids upright instead of on its side, but we got out, we walked away, and nobody got hurt. So helicopter lessons and golf lessons, I'm not sure how well they work for me. That being said, I have flown the helicopter all over the country now. I've been to the West Coast twice with it. I've been up to New Hampshire, way up into the top of Michigan, down to Florida. And as you said, I do have the jet. And you know what's fun about the jet is not how I use it personally, and we do get to get away once in a while, but how I can use it professionally. I make a point of taking my employees and trying to get them home for dinner as much as we can. And it's a magic carpet ride. You can leave early in the morning and call on 2 or 3 businesses or customers and be back home in time for dinner, and that's amazing.
Amen.
The other thing I've tried to do with the jet, and we've done a lot of it, it's another tool that we can give back. And I can't tell you how many trips it's made to the Mayo Clinic on behalf of friends or organizations. We sent it to Haiti a few years ago, and we had the big issue there. We're always letting other people use it as just a tool.
I know you've helped a lot of nonprofits with it as well. Chuck, thank you so much. God has uniquely designed you, and you are living out that design, and you're using it, I think, for the greatest value, and that's to help bring restoration to others. You truly have a sweet life. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I would encourage you this week to take steps to achieve what God is prompting you to do, and that you would, in faith, through obedience, be responding to His still small voice. And what you will learn is that His vision is truly followed by His provision. His prompting will be followed by His resources to accomplish that vision. And you can trust Him. You can trust Him with every step you take. And He will direct your paths to be used by your ultimate value to bring His restoration to others. And you too can truly live a sweet life.